Welcome. You're listening to the Good Girls Don't podcast with Ashleigh
and Verity Mansfield.
This is the podcast where we smash those rules that we've been taught to follow both as men and women and burn the damn rule book. We're tackling the big issues and the issues nobody wants to talk about, and we'll be fiercely feminist about it.
This podcast is about inspiration, education, compassion, and being the change that you need to see in this world. This podcast is for the trailblazers, the freedom fighters, and the soul igniters, and all the women just like you who are ready to break the good girl rules and be heard.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and its First Nations people on which this podcast is produced and consumed. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now. You're gonna see an evolution. And they'll never bring us down. No, they'll never bring us down.
Hello, hello, hello.
Aloha, Verity.
Well, I have found the most beautiful, sensual soul that I possibly could talk to us all about something that's really important to me.
And what would that be?
This idea about women and their sexuality and the shame around sex, and how as women we're told that there's only two options of whether we embrace our inner whore, the Mary Magdalene, the rejected prostitute, or we embrace the virgin mother, the saintly mother, the sinner or the saint. And I love, love, love breaking this concept up or blowing it up, because I honestly believe there's so much bullshit involved in it. And it's so important for women to own their sexuality. So I found the beautiful Mia Moore, who is she's just absolutely heaven to speak to.
Oh, she was gorgeous.
Oh, she was. It's like talking to honey.
It really was.
So Mia Moore describes herself as a poet, a lover, a gypsy soul, and a shamanic bodyworker.
Oh, and it was so good. We talked about the traditional roles for women, either as the whore or the saintly mother, but we also spoke about these really interesting points, like what is a dakini and the concept of sacred sex work, which can be really triggering for a lot of people. We spoke about stigmas around women owning their sexuality and dismissing shame, and the importance of pleasure and embracing our abundance of sexual energy, and why men are hungry to see women rise.
Which is beautiful because, talking, in terms of feminism, there's this deep-seated belief that men don't want us to rise. And I think we're really turning a point here in the feminist movement where not only are we, helping men to rise, but the fact that men want us to rise.
Oh my God, yes. And I am so here for it. I don't know about you, but I'm here with pom-poms for it.
So stay tuned, keep seated, grab your cup of coffee, whatever it is you're doing, and divulge and just absolutely gorge on this episode. You'll absolutely love it. And, share our feedback with us back on our Facebook page, Good Girls Don't Podcast.
And leave us a rating and review in iTunes, because it helps us reach more people. All of this is coming up in just a second on the Good Girls Don't Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mia, for joining us today. We're so excited to talk to you about something that's been coming up quite a lot on our podcast. And the minute that Ashleigh and I were like, we need to do an episode on sacred sexuality, you literally hit our radar. And we just couldn't help but almost pester you into talking to us.
Amazing.
So what we really wanted to, have a chat about was this beautiful work that you do around sacred sexuality, because there's so much out there about women and how women stereotypically have to decide in terms of their sexuality whether they want to play, the saint, or whether they want to play the whore. And
I think women struggle so much to balance that within themselves and to really embrace the power of their sexuality and their sensuality.
Mm-hmm.
So you refer to yourself as a dakini. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what is a dakini and why would someone seek one out?
Sure. Yeah, I think the name kind of came to me after about a year of doing work around my own sexuality. So before that, when I started, I just had this creeping sensation, all the time when we're looking at me or after me, or, like there's this attraction piece where you feel like you're being preyed upon. And I didn't really know what to do with it. I was trying to ignore it. I was trying to push it away. I did anything I could. But at the same time, I was traveling around the world and, I was relying on people's generosity as a way of surviving as well. Like I was hitchhiking a lot. I was staying at people's houses and I wanted to be safe. And eventually, many, many circumstances led me to do work around, I really need to hone in on this sexuality piece because it's going to keep coming up. It's not going to go away in my interactions. And it was really male teachers, male colleagues, everybody had this piece around it. And I wanted to start a process where I can give them what they want.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't feel like it's taking from me.
Yes.
Oh, that's a big one.
And I think that's so powerful because I know a lot of women, especially in, women in relationships and women who are married with children, sex becomes almost this.
It's like a transaction.
Yeah, where it's kind of like women don't want to give it up because it becomes almost like there's a power play that comes into sex. And this, how do we give something to someone without feeling like we're being taken advantage of or, like you said, something's getting taken away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's bought into this whole economic model where we give and take, right? So even love and even sexuality is a lot of consuming. So, you can just look at the state of porn and how it's just about consuming someone almost to the point of abuse. And you can just pray that the women get paid to do that. But there's a point where I hit, which was really, really owning that point. Okay, actually I have an abundance, I have a furnace. It's not just attraction and sexual predators coming at me. It's actually me having something already that is attracting that attention. And if I can transmute that energy in myself, so I did a lot of dance practice and I've done a lot of energy work throughout my 20s. So I kind of knew how to transmute energies of sexuality into heart or into consciousness. And I started to play with that with other people. So when it came to interaction, it's oh, you're coming at me with a hungry, out. And I'm just going to come back at you with a heart, which means I'll penetrate another center of yours or I'll come with something else. And it changes the whole vibration of the interaction.
That is so beautiful because I guess traditionally sex itself is women are penetrated by men, but I don't think women understand that they can also penetrate men on an energetic level and especially through the heart space, which is so powerful.
Yeah. And it became about taking the lead as well, especially when I started stepping on stage with this energy, it was okay, I know that I have it in me and I can do and dance. And I've been shunning away from it in public dance floors because I feel it's just going to attract the wrong kind of attention. And then when I finally went into a club space, I realized it's actually, I'm empowered by this position because I get to give you something and I get to keep my boundary.
Yeah.
And what I'm giving is actually my choice, and I know most people tend to check out in this situation. So there's a huge dissociation that happens for most women in their bodies if they're doing something that they don't want to do, especially in the sexual sense. So actually doing the opposite, bringing my consciousness to my sexuality as a way of transmitting my essence to the world.
That's so beautiful. What do you think it is then about? Because I think so many people do disconnect, or so many women do disconnect from themselves and their own sensuality. Like, either you hear a lot of women who will kind of embrace their sensuality, but it's still sort of caught up in, pleasing a man in a way that they do sometimes, cross their own boundaries and devalue their own boundaries. Or women can go the other way, where they just shut off like their sensuality and their sexuality, and you end up with a lot of marriages and relationships that are sexless. Like, they're not having sex, they're not, connecting at a sexual level. And I've heard so many women that say, we're past that now. Like, sex is great when you first meet someone, and they really sort of lose and disconnect from that beautiful power. That you can co-create with someone through sex.
Yeah. So I would ask a few questions. Like, first of all, I feel like, yes, women are very hard engaged individuals. So if you're in love with someone, you're like madly like infused with them in the physical and the mental and the sexual and every way. And I guess that falling in love phase dies in a long-term relationship. And then where does your pleasure go? Like, where does your embodied, is there that's where the issues around shame around sexuality or fear or the idea that that's just this form of service comes in. So I feel like actually honing in on our own desire and our own sexuality is a more of a, like a core of our being. There's a lot of womb work going on and like restoration of the sacredness of the female organs. So I feel like actually the potential for pleasure that we have and the potential for us to teach men through that pleasure is huge. But we need to go there first. Like, we need to understand what's happening in our body.
That's incredible. It really sounds like a lot of what you're describing it's almost like taking back, taking back's probably not the right word for it, but like a re-education of our anatomy and this, just attaching a bit more sensuality to ourselves, and rather than leaving it at the door, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. And it's, we're so accustomed to the male gaze in all, societal forms of advertisement and everything. So we think that sexuality is having big boobs and this and that.
Yes, it's so true.
That's actually not necessarily a turn on. Like, when I've started to explore with women and like explore like sexuality as a range, I notice different things that I'm attracted to, and it's never been about looks. It's more a sense of how this person feels, how their skin is, how they move. So a lot of it, as a dancer, I feel like the most natural way for me to get attracted to someone is to see them dance. Like, I see their souls shine through them.
That's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So I've always just like gravitated towards beings that had a unique way to dance, and then try to resonate with that and try to learn through that and find the common tone. And I feel like that's actually what we could do in partnerships, and even in the, that's where you go to a disco, you see people dance, you try to do the mating dance, and you try to find someone that you can, at least meet steps with. But that's such an important phase. Like, we could learn to do that in a very, very slow way, and probably actually be more true to our own boundaries and our own movement of the self in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor as well, just for how relationships should work, where it is a dance between, the two people in the relationship, whether it's two men, two women, or a male and a female. But just trying to find that movement, that common ground of energy within the relationship, and, you know, seeing the beauty in each other's movement and each other's energy. And, you know, I think that as well as where the intimacy comes in, when we can see that other person's, you know, I guess, energetic beauty, and we can play with it in such a beautiful way, without having those fears engaged, or feeling like they're going to take something from us, or feeling that we've got to protect ourselves in a relationship. You know, we see so many relationships falling apart, and the arguing and the conflict, and you know, men complaining there's not enough sex. I've even heard women complaining there's not enough sex too. You know, it goes both ways. But for me, I always think that sex is such a beautiful way of connecting and healing in a relationship.
Yes.
But we're not taught this.
No, and also we're not taught to actually love our own bodies and love our own sexuality. So the first place of like you needing or you having a desire that's unfulfilled is like, well, why aren't you doing something about it? Like, why aren't you just, you know, like dancing or enjoying your own erotic self without blaming someone else for it? Like, it's your body. You can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah. And I think we are trained as women to continue to look at men and expecting them to always take the action, or expecting them to always know what to do. And I think women need to step back into that power and owning that power, that this is their body and they should be the expert of their own body, and that there's nothing wrong with teaching a man, you know, how to know your body, because like every single human body is different. And we all have preferences and how we like to be touched or romanced, or, you know, some people thrive on, you know, really beautiful and deep conversations, and for someone else, you know, they love being stroked a particular way, and, you know, somebody else, you know, would prefer, you know, like a completely different form of, you know, expression of love or whatever it is. But we don't have these conversations.
No, and it's also, I feel like the first thing that you and we should stop doing is pretending. Like, when you're pretending to enjoy something that is not actually enjoyable, that's going to like lead to a catastrophe in the long run.
I'd say that puts it mildly.
It's like, if you're not really having an orgasm, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this?
It's so true. So what led you on this path? How did you come across wanting to explore your own sacred sexuality?
I think it was like a few incidences that happened early on, and I kind of went into a tantric yoga school when I was 20, and I wasn't very sexual. I was already in this like idea that I'm just going to transmute it into cosmic energy. Like, I'll be celibate and I'll be super love and light. And I literally stopped bleeding for a year.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, so like it literally works. It literally, you can transmute your energy if you're really determined not to be a sexual being. Like, yes, like doing a practice. And yeah, I don't know exactly what happened, but I feel like I was very, very high on kind of cosmic energy and consciousness at the time. And then I had to come down from it. It literally called it coming down from the mountain. So like coming from Himalayas and coming back into normal society and work and dating and all this stuff started happening again. And then I found like my biggest inspiration has always been dance. And through dance, I found a way to move my body and have the pleasure within my body that I like would crave with another person, but actually it was already there. So I would dance with like a lover that I only dreamt of dancing with, but in my head I could like literally just do this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is beautiful.
Yeah, and then like led into the point where at an ecstatic dance one day, I literally started orgasming in the dance floor for no reason. I don't even know what I did to this day. I just contorted my body in some ways, and suddenly like it was a literal visceral sensation. pulsations, and it lasted for like 2 hours. I was just in bliss. I was in heaven. And I went home with it. I was just like sitting in the tram, riding my bike, and I'm still kind of pulsating within. So I had like an internal orgasmic awakening.
Wow, that's incredible. And is that through, do you think, a lot of the tantric practices that you would have done earlier, like building up, I guess, to that level of awareness and being in tune with your body?
Yes. I would say, and I would give this as a way of kind of visualizing and also like doing the transmutation within your own body is, you can start with just like literally squeezing muscles, and like we've all done some sort of like exercises around the vaginal walls and all that. And what I visualize when I'm dancing often is a spiral vortex within my body. So I start to kind of like draw energy in through the pussy and like transmuting it into the heart, or like spreading it out into the dance floor through the heart. So that it becomes like a funnel of my body where anything that's coming at me, I'm just going to dance with it. And when I feel like, okay, I'm putting it into either my heart or my throat or my like crown, and it just gets me into states.
That is so gorgeous. And it's so true. Like I've done certain similar exercises, like, in the bedroom with my partner, and it does become this like mind-blowing sex between the two of us. And, we're always looking at each other like, oh my God, like what just happened there? But it's something that, it has that, we have to set our intention for it in order to create it. It's not like it just accidentally would happen for us. But I think this is where I always get a bit upset, I guess, for other women when they talk about not wanting to have sex, where they're completely tuned out of it, where they roll their eyes at the idea of having sex with their partner. And I just think, like I've been in that relationship, like having been divorced, and I just think, oh my God, I never want that again. I never want to exclude sex. Like it's so nurturing and feeding and nourishing to our souls, and the amount of energy that you can create and transmute between two people, and that he can walk away feeling even more enlivened, and his whole, like every fiber of his being is like so lit up and nourished. Like that is such an awesome thing to be able to do for your partner.
Totally. And you mentioned the most important point, I guess, in like partner play, especially the intention becomes so vital. Like I feel all sexuality happens for a reason. Like if we're attracted to someone, there's already something that energetically we're sharing, and there's so many ways to find out what that is, not necessarily going into like full physicality. And fascinating that we can, like, first of all, know ourselves and know our bodies and know our pleasure, and then like discover someone else's pleasure. Like, isn't that amazing?
It is. It is
the
amazing.
best kind of treasure hunt.
Yeah.
We all know it's amazing, because when you're playing, with your partner or something, and if they don't orgasm, and men say this a lot all the time, like if a female doesn't orgasm when he's with her, he feels like he's done a disservice. Like, so many men will admit that they feel like they've that they gain so much power and that sense of confidence, and like it's such a boost for them, and they're able to, provide that beautiful space for their partner.
Yeah, totally. It's actually, like men are literally the givers of energy in that situation, and women are kind of taking and transmuting, like pussy's like the minus polarity, and women are supposed to give through the heart. I feel like what often happens in like resentful relationships, whether it's like in the prostitution scene or in partnership, the heart is shut down, and the women are responsible for that, I feel.
Do you feel like the women are the ones that shut the heart down because they're not keeping that heart space open during sex, or the resentment from, I guess, outside the bedroom, whether there's, they're feeling taken advantage of in terms of maybe there's not an equal share in the household responsibilities or in bringing in the income and raising children, that resentment builds, and then the female shuts the heart space down, and then sex just becomes like,
then, you know, as you were saying, like the men really want to please the woman, so there's like already this like whole hunger from the man to just like see you rise up in pleasure. And I feel like women, the only way at some point we would gamble with it is to shut it down. You know, like that used to be the only form we have power, because a lot of society, women didn't have a chance to say no to children or to household tasks and all that. So I do feel like there's a big generational transpersonal resentment piece.
Yeah.
And to break that down, we really have to stop doing that. Like it is between you and yourself if you're doing jobs that you don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
like
definitely.
The most empowering thing is to actually speak out about everything that's happening in your life, and that will liberate the heart. Again, like that will open you up if you're being honest about dissatisfaction.
And I guess that comes back to the whole concept that we usually talk about, like breaking the good girl rules. Like, you know, the good girl is told to be quiet and not to complain and to not rock the boat and to, you know, not have a voice and not to speak up. And to put everyone else's needs first. So she's already being pre-programmed, you know, or primed to become resentful in her life, in her relationship, you know, before she's even left high school.
Yeah, and I mean, it isn't that long ago when hysteria was still like a disease, you know, people would be like admitted into an institution for going ragey or crazy or wanting.
Actually, I was reading an article on this because they were talking about hysteria. I think it was like in the Victorian era. And that's when, you know, someone invented the vibrator. And it was originally invented to cure women of their hysteria. You know, which is kind of, it's funny, but at the same time, you know, it kind of, men and women is, again, to open up that sexuality that, you know, I don't think the doctor was probably doing it in the heart space or the right intention that maybe it should have energetically have been done.
Yeah, there's been so much neglect to the emotional body throughout many, many centuries, I guess. So it's all coming back now, and we do have to like retrieve those parts and really not carry on the resentment piece anymore. Like every time someone makes a comment about men that's hateful, I kind of cringe.
Oh, definitely. Like both Ashleigh and I refer to ourselves as feminists, but we also, you know, like one of my friends was really beautiful and she refers to me as a romantic feminist because she's like, you just love and adore men. Like you want women to be equal, but we want men to rise as well. Like we want women to rise and to bring their men with them, not leave them behind. We don't want women to rise at the expense of men. You know, it's got to work for everyone. Like we want these beautiful, empowered men as much as we want beautiful, empowered women.
Hells yeah.
So again, like, you know, we have, like, we've talked about the resentment that women can carry that can shut down the heart space, and then, you know, that shuts down also their sexuality. But what about shame as well? Like shame, like women have been taught to have so much shame around their sexuality and their bodies.
Yeah, the overt expression of female sexuality is like, it's immediately slutty, right? Like you obviously get judged for being flamboyant or, you know, whatever it is, the terms. I remember being shunned by women, especially in my like early high school era. Like even if you're seen talking to men, like other women will get angry at you. So again, I'm bringing it back home as like, how much are you judging other people for doing this?
Yeah. I remember getting divorced and becoming a single parent, and I felt like I was just treated like the prostitute again, where you couldn't talk to anyone's husband because all of a sudden you were deemed as a threat. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't at the time want my own husband, let alone anyone else's. Like I need my space. I want to be single. I want to just, you know, heal in my own space. And yet it was so weird trying to navigate these, these friendships where women all of a sudden wanted to keep you at a distance.
Yeah, and absolutely, as a single person, you should have access to intimacy and cuddles and all this from your friends and from men without being expected to sleep with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an interesting piece that I'm really looking forward to tackling in the next few months around like females talking about jealousy and talking about their rage and talking about all these like unowned kind of masculine parts, which is, I feel like, where the shame comes in from.
Wow, yeah, that'd be really, really powerful.
Oh, yeah. This is hitting on some really big points for me. I love it. I've got they're not little. I've got enormous explosions happening all over my head as I'm joining the dots together on some things.
Amazing.
And I guess as well that shame goes into the whole idea, like with sex workers, and the concept or the word prostitution has so many negative associations to it, yet there's so much research out there about sacred prostitution, how these women were actually, especially trained energetic healers that could help men heal through sex.
Yeah. And that's what I would love it to be to this day. And I do feel like there are some amazing like sex workers out there, whatever their way of doing that is.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it was a big point for me when I went into like working in a strip club. I had 24 hours before I had like said I would come and until I had to open the door to the club. And I could go through in my head all the ways I was judging myself. And it's this inner peace. And I feel like it's really, there's a lot of female judgment of that.
Yeah.
More than men, because the men actually, I find a lot of them are respectful, and a lot of them, like, you are able to earn respect from the men because you are doing this work and that you're putting yourself out there. And it's actually the women that have disrespected me more.
And I guess that makes sense when you talk about jealousy, because I've felt that as a single mother dating again, where these married women, do you get a sense of jealousy? Like they're angry at you for being back out there and being able to sleep with other men and to have that sexuality opened up again, and that lust for life and, that enjoyment and, being able to dive in deep into that, beautiful pleasure, exploring another person's body and the excitement that all goes with it. And there's this almost dichotomy within women where we want to own our sexuality, but we feel like we can't because we have all this story and shame around it. And so when we see another woman do it, whether it's, a single mother who's out there dating and enjoying her dating life, or whether, it is, a stripper or whoever, there seems to be all of this judgment that comes out because they're actually judging their own lack of sexual expression or their inability to freely, sexually express themselves.
Well, let's take that back to historically, you have women competing for a man for a position in society as well. You have to marry up, you have to find a man and have kids and, conform to these really strict rules of what it means to be feminine and womanly. And if you've got women competing for the affection of a man, I mean, of course, we're still recovering from that today, hence all of the not so lovely reactions and emotions spilling out everywhere from people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember as a teenager, I was always making these like dream scenarios of myself in the year 2025 or something. And I always had 3 husbands. And I was in good terms with all of them. In my imagination, this was like, we just have like this open arrangement where I have 3 men that can, respond to all my cares and needs and take care of kids and whatnot. So I feel like in my head, I was never buying into the monogamy principle where there's like literally a state of lack. You're living in a lacking kind of scenario where there's only one person to provide for me.
And fulfill all those needs, the desires.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure to put on one person, right?
Yeah.
And especially when that person is not you. Like, what are you doing? Again, like, take charge of your own life and design it the way you want it, and including relationships.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful friend who considers themselves to be polyamorous, and I know they will listen to this episode. So hello, because you know what you're talking about. You know who I'm talking about. But they have this really beautiful way of explaining, I guess, their perspective of being that one person, that they don't feel that they could provide everything for one person. And they're really honest about their relationships, and they're very open about their relationships, and they don't go seeking out numerous people. They'll just, if they meet someone, they've met someone, and they, you know, are happy to be in a relationship with one person, you know, if that's all there is at that time. And if someone else comes on the scene, and then maybe there's those negotiations and conversations. But they're always very honest when they meet someone about talking about, you know, their, I guess, their identity, seeing themselves as polyamorous, of, you know, wanting to share themselves with more than just one person, and having all this kind of, you know, little mini community of people that, you know, you share and exchange their energy on different levels. And it's really beautiful. Like, it's a really beautiful concept. I don't know if I could do it. Like, I would have to unpack so much more of my humanness to get there. But when we look at it without judgment, there's so much beautiful truths in there, and it shows up so many, I guess, flaws in the ideal of being in a monogamous relationship.
Yeah. And
my God, yeah.
It's just, I wanted to say something about the polyamory piece, because I feel like people look at it as this like black and white, yes or no kind of choice. Like, oh my God, if I'm open relating, then it means like we could just sleep with everyone. And that's not really how it goes in reality. All the fears that you're naming is exactly why we're in it. And what I've found with my partner now is like there's all these different gears that we can do it from. Like, we can do it on first gear and be like, oh, we're just going to date other people. Like, we're literally just going to go out and have food and dinner and drinks and whatever with other people, and like maybe have a cuddle, but that's it. And at least for me, what's opened that up a lot is finding my attraction to women, like not actually hiding or shunning that away. So bringing it back into like inner work within the feminine community. Again, the whole jealousy piece is connected to that. Like, as long as we keep shunning someone for their sexuality, we can't really appreciate it either.
No, so true.
And if we see a woman's sexuality as a beautiful blossoming thing, like, we actually do have appreciation and attraction, and we can see what the beauty is. We can fall in love with that. Even if we're not like sexually attracted to it, we can still appreciate it and see the beauty. And that's like a huge key piece into making peace with all kinds of relationships, including the poly scene. Yeah,
definitely. So how do you think these preconceived ideas then around sex, I guess, in women actually harm women on an everyday basis? Like, if we're shutting ourselves off and turning off our sexuality and not engaging, you know, essentially with our partners, like, what are the effects of that?
I guess the biggest one that I've mentioned and seen is some sort of a numbness or dissociation from your body. So really kind of dying from waist down, in a sense. And like I mentioned before, there's a way of doing that consciously, where it's like, my intention is to transmute that energy into meditation or in other pursuits, which is fine. Like, as long as it comes out in some positive, creative way for you, you don't need to be having a lot of sex. But at the same time, if you're doing that as a way of shutting down and having less life force in general, like if you're feeling fatigued and stressed and tired and like all these things, then probably you're not open in that level. And usually when we start to go into it and open that up in like one-on-one work or sessions or whatever the form that you access your womb space again is, there's a lot of trauma that comes up, and there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of the no's that were never said come out first before you discover the pleasure underneath.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Ashley's just nodding away in the background there.
I'm not just nodding away. I know I say this all the time, but I'm just going to go pick up my jaw off the floor. I just know so many people that I get to talk to through another podcast that I run, Recovery for Trauma Survivors, and this will be huge for them in understanding what's going on with their own body and the lack of intimacy that they experience and the frustration that comes with that, because even though I think a lot of the time so many of us are disconnected sexually, it doesn't mean we don't crave it. It doesn't mean we're not going nuts because we seriously just want to be held or touched or have that physical, wonderful, beautiful bit of comfort and contact that reassures us the world is okay and that we're okay. I just know that this is going to be so huge for so many women to hear that, because so many of them are going to resonate with that feeling that you nailed that analogy of feeling like, you know, there's almost like a kind of dying or a death going on, like a sapping of life force. I've heard so many women describe it like that. And it's, oh my God. Just having a little mindgasm over here.
That's where everything happens, isn't it? That has to do with life force. Like in terms of our ovaries and like menstruation and, you know, the ability just to fall pregnant, like that is such a creative, life-giving space. And so it makes sense that when we shut down our sexuality, you know, like you said, if we're not transmuting it into another way of creativity or growth or expansion, you know, if we're just shutting it down, we're literally turning our life force off.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also a link to kind of all the pelvic pain and cramps and things that come up. I feel like I've literally obliterated cramps by like feeling in, like, again, it comes down to like feeling in, putting my awareness down into my womb and being able to relax those muscles. So a lot of the kind of de-trauma work that I could do as a bodily practice is like, it is literally massage. It is literally the same as knots on your shoulder, but you have knots internally in your like sexual organs. And they require a similar kind of release. And there's a lot of not just physical pain, but emotional pain connected to that. And yeah, talking about having kids or not having kids or, you know, being abused or whatever there is, like that's usually what tenses the muscles up and causes us to feel less, even in intercourse.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, this is such a beautiful conversation. There's so many different levels to it.
I know.
I think Ashley and I will definitely be listening back to this ourselves.
No, this is going to keep going. Like, I'm going to be turning this over in my head for weeks.
Amazing.
I'm really curious. I've got a bit of an off-the-fly sort of question for you. I'm really, really curious. Earlier, you were talking about the difference between having sex with intention and with consciousness around it and with that sacredness added to it versus the kind of sex that someone might have in order for, like, I don't know what the right terminology here is, but not that.
Like just get over and done with
that. No, you know, I'm just thinking in terms of like the survivors that I get to talk to and have the privilege of knowing. A lot of them describe this period of promiscuity that they go through, and not like a little bit, it's a lot. And sometimes they even describe it as an addiction to sex. And I'm quite curious what you might have to say on that topic.
Sure. In terms of what I know about trauma work and how it kind of programs our psyche is that we do tend to seek out similar feeling or sensation as like when we had the trauma. Like there's a weird aspect in BDSM culture and stuff where actually there might be birth trauma. It's not necessarily even abuse or anything that like happened to you sexually, but something makes you search for the pain again, because that makes you feel alive, or that makes you either dissociate or come back to the body.
Yeah.
So it's still a link around dissociation in whatever level. So a lot of the work in sacred sexuality, right, is like slowing down and breathing and bringing yourself back into the present moment. There's no bypassing into any other fantasy scenario. There's no bypassing into the rewards and gains and the give and takes of it, which is probably what, like kind of regular prostitution is. Like, okay, I'll do it because of the money, but there's another beautiful way that I've seen some escorts practice, which is like, I'll provide you with this experience and this heart opening, and really doing it again from the heart with an open heart seems to be the key. Because like the energy should flow kind of like an infinity sign, like an 8 within two bodies. Yeah. Where heart is kind of the connection point, and that's where the woman is pouring out into the man. And when a woman can awaken the man's heart, like that's safety, that's trust, and that's true connection.
I love everything you've just said, of course. I really love what you've said about the prostitution aspect with the escorts opening up the heart, because I think every day, at least in Western culture, we are so bombarded with messages about what escorts are and aren't, and that they can't possibly be well-rounded, interesting people with a lot to offer society, that they're often portrayed as this other thing that's lesser than, and quite frankly, treated terribly. And we see that in all of the movies and the TV shows and video games and advertising about that. And I just love that there's this alternative out there that's like, actually, there's another way here, and it can be amazing.
Yeah, there's a really big difference, especially what I've noticed. I'm kind of doing more tantric body work. I'm not doing full-on escort services, but there's a big difference between what are you seeking for. If you're just seeking pleasure and fantasy and desire, like I've had clients who come to me in that kind of sense, like, oh, I just want this hot girl to, do something for me. And then they get blown away when it's just like, no, this is about you. Like, this isn't about you running a fantasy on me and me doing something for you. This is about you experiencing pleasure in your own body. So whatever it takes, like sometimes I can blindfold people or like tie them up and stuff just to be able to like get them to be in their own body instead of their mind.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to ask you now. Sorry, Verity, I'm hogging your time. I'm really curious, with doing this kind of work, do you come up against any sort of preconceived ideas of what you do, and I suppose like what a public perception of the work you do is? Do you come up against anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a constant kind of concern, and which is why I'm kind of like want to transition out of doing one-on-one work into teaching people to do this in their partnerships, in their own lives somehow. And like hoping that it'll spread faster, actually, because I can't as a one person, and I know that there's an army of people doing this kind of work, but we're all having to be so hush-hush because of societal discriminations and legal concerns and, all kinds of issues that like society has put around doing sexuality work, and especially kind of categorizing prostitution, human trafficking, and tantric workers in the same category. So it's definitely hindering my like ability and my desire to do this work more publicly.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And it seems so ridiculous, doesn't it? Like, why is this kind of work considered immoral, like, or even illegal? And shouldn't we, like, who is teaching couples to have this type of sexual interaction, and to be able to empower a couple to be able to, you know, do their own sexual healing, and working on, you know, healing each other through sex, and, you know, igniting the heart space through sex, you know, bringing the heart space through sex. Like, it just seems ridiculous that this isn't stuff that, you know, is easily accessible, or that it should be, you know, swept under the carpet, or, you know, we're turning a blind eye to this. Like, this stuff is so essential in my eyes to just human life, not creating human life, but re-energizing our own life force.
Totally. And I mean, there's such a big gift in just even having the permission to explore within your relationship, and again, making your own boundaries up within it. Like, what are you doing? And yeah, I'm hoping to offer that, and that actually puts it into a safer area where I don't have to touch anyone foreign, and I can be teaching on a different level. But to speak for all kind of sex workers of any affiliation, like, there's really a big stigma, and I don't see that it's actually lessening. I feel like it's actually growing. Like, there's a big campaign around, like, not supporting even the industries that are supporting sex workers to get better rights. So yeah, it's an issue that I would love to kind of see more out in the world, because it is about our life force, and demonizing something that's doing work around liberating that life force feels like it's continuing our oppression, it's continuing our separation from each other.
Yeah.
Instead of finding more mature ways to deal with this.
Yeah, I think this is a really, like, you know, beautiful conversation that ties in really well from an episode we did with Catherine Lyle about this concept of, you know, using sex as a way to, you know, where I think she was talking about how women receive through the heart space and men receive through the sexual organs, and being able to create these relationships where, you know, both parties can, like, give to each other and create with each other. And, you know, like you said, breaking down these stigmas around sex and sexuality. Like, it's just it just doesn't really make any sense why this is a problem, or why this, you know, is something that everyone's not trying to figure out and sort out, because it affects all of us.
Yeah. So in that sense, I would recommend everyone to get some sort of tantric massage, body work, and to, like, massage the whole body, including genitals, because that's where the area of most tension and repression. And, you know, if you really want to go into fear, shame, and guilt, you have to include the genitals and the butt in a massage.
Yeah.
Like, where it comes out from.
I love having my butt massage. There's nothing better.
I just love that.
I've got tick.
I just love that in this conversation we've really gone from, you know, the transactional kind of sex that people have a lot of the time, and sex really almost being weaponized in a way, and, you know, en masse. And even though we need sex in order for each and every single person to be here, because we haven't perfected, you know, test tube, you know, laboratory grown babies.
Nor should we.
But I also love that, like, we've kind of done this 180 in this conversation where it's like, okay, let's talk about the really bad kind of sex that's just not super awesome. And it feels like it's our greatest form of connection and healing, which of course has that flip side where it can also be our greatest source of pain. And I love the beauty in this conversation of how that's happened, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think one of the other things for, you know, everyday people is that even when they know that they need to work on their sex life in terms of making it more, you know, intimate and sensual, like, people don't know where to go, and they're aware that there are, you know, dodgy practitioners who do tantric work, and that they don't know who to trust. They don't know which are the safe places to go.
Yeah, because this is
deal
not
with
something
this.
Go, I'll talk to my GP about it.
And then, you did that. It was something really clinical.
Yeah. And that's part of the legislation completely being missing. So like you can't really advertise as a sacred sex worker. It's still looked at in the same category as all the rest. So there's also, I've seen an uprising of a lot of prostitutes turning into like, yeah, I'll do tantric massage and I'll just give you a hand job. And like, you know, throw in some extras, and that kind of then washes away from, actually having qualified spirit-oriented practitioners. Yeah. So there's not a solid qualification system in the world. You're welcome to look up, I think there's a website called Sacred Eros in the US, and I can't think of other ones in the rest of the world, but really kind of like play by ear and contact actually anyone that you know in this field and ask them for recommendations.
Yeah, I think Amy Chow that we interviewed a couple of weeks ago is a perfect person, you know, that people can reach out to as well if you're in Australia or Bali. You know, I'm pretty sure that she'll be able to point people in the right direction. But it's so true. Like, I guess as well, one of the reasons we do these interviews is we want to highlight conversations that women are not having between themselves and not having with their partners. And, you know, like you said, if your industry is there's so much red tape and there's so much strangulation around it, you know, if we're not talking to each other, if we're not having these conversations, how do we find out? You know, how do we know that there's people like you out there? How do we know that there's, you know, options? How do we know the right places to go to where, you know, you get the authentic, you know, tantric teachings? You know, and that's why these conversations are so important, you know, to have in open space. So women can hear them and just be like, oh my God, I've been waiting to have this conversation, but I didn't know who to speak to, or talking to their friends and saying, oh my God, I just listened to this crazy podcast, and, you know, just listen to it and tell me what your thoughts are. You know, let's catch over a glass of red wine and have a giggle about it, like whatever it is. They're just starting to have these conversations so that we can spread light on them, so that women can find answers and solutions. And I know women in my own life are having so many issues in terms of their uterus and, you know, with bleeding, and, you know, they joke about their vaginas being broken, and they're not engaging in any sexual activity with their husbands. They're like, oh my God, that's gross, disgusting, that's all ended for us, never have to do that again. And they don't know why their bodies are giving up. Because they've kind of given up on their body. So these conversations are just so beautiful to broaden people's perspectives, to put more ideas out there, and to enable more women to step up and have these conversations and to seek out more knowledge and empowerment around them.
Yeah, completely. I remember I started out with a friend group from college, and we still kind of gather every year or something when I'm around, and it's always like, it's amazing to see the milestick of the conversations as they keep deepening into womb stuff, and like we gave everyone yoni eggs, and now we were talking about butt plugs, and, you know, like it's just like it's progressing the more we talk about sexuality amongst ourselves. And, you know, more of us are becoming practitioners and being able to actually exchange sessions, or like do also the emotional work without, I feel like that the only fear that we have is that fear of judgment and fear of being shunned from our female group because of talking about sexuality.
Yeah, it's so true. Absolutely true. And it's quite interesting. This just popped up into my head. We were at work the other day, and someone had been watching something on TV, and it was to do with a woman that was marking herself with her own menstrual blood, and it was for a medicinal
Oh, I
purpose.
know what you're talking about. I watched that episode.
Yeah, I can't remember what the
Medicinal myth
intention was behind it, but everyone in the office was like, "Oh my god, that's disgusting. That's gag worthy." Blah 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 blah. And the men were like, "Ugh," and I was like, "Well, hang on a second. Like, why is it okay for men to want to ejaculate on a woman? You know, like there's so much out there as porn industry as well about men ejaculating on women's faces, but the idea of a woman putting her own, you know, bodily fluid on herself, like, how is that offensive? Like, I get it from a basic human perspective, but we need to kind of really, like, there's so many ways that we're inhibited sexually and that we demonize a woman's sexuality, that yet we'll celebrate, support, and make money out of a man's. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, we have really wacky ideas about our sexual bodies.
Totally. And there's also, I don't know, like, this question for me coming up with that is like, and how are we abusing the men? Because again, the men actually get off on the woman's pleasure, and if we're not actually speaking out about what that actually means for us, I feel like that's where we hit the dead end.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation, Mia. It's been so beautiful. And I know this conversation is going to give a lot of women, you know, that kind of like, oh shit, I need to think about this.
It's that little, you know what, it's that little bit of courage that sometimes people need to open up that dialogue with themselves.
Yeah, or with their partners, or with their best friends over a glass of wine. It is such a beautiful conversation, and it is such a much needed conversation. And, you know, I have so much honor as well that this conversation, like, there was such a beautiful energy about the conversation, you know, that we've had. Like, it hasn't been dirty. It hasn't been, I don't know what the words are.
It's been respectful and gorgeous in all the right ways.
Yeah, that reverence and that honor, which is just, you know, that's how we should, you know, come to our sexuality with. Those feelings, those intentions of honoring our bodies and respecting our bodies and celebrating our bodies. And we can still respect our bodies and, you know, enjoy sex with whoever we want to, and just breaking all those stigmas down.
Totally, one by one.
So how can people find you, Mia?
I guess Facebook is where you can most easily message me, and you can find me on Mia Moore. And I'm currently like changing my website around a bit. I'm sure there's going to be events and courses and things going on as I'm migrating to Australia in the next few months.
Oh, are you really?
Yes.
Oh, yes. You are. We're bringing her forward. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes. It's the best climate that I could find for now. I'm definitely
Maybe not in the south. It's freezing right now.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Oh, well, we would definitely be welcoming you with open arms in Australia. But yeah, you can find Mia, like she said, on Facebook. She has Mystic Mia Moore. That's Moore as in M-O-R. And you can also track her down on Instagram as the Global Dakini. The Global Dakini, Dakini. Sorry.
And we'll have those links in the show notes for you too.
Yeah, they would definitely be in the show notes. And also, Mia, when you do get over here, you've got all your programs set up, just drop us a message, because we would love to support you on that as well, on all of our social media.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. It's been a beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much, Mia. Hey, if you want to continue this conversation, head over to our Facebook page and be part of the revolution. You can find us at Good Girls Don't Podcast on Facebook. Please note, we cannot create change alone. Your support, likes,
comments, shares, and iTunes reviews help us to give a voice to the insanely inspirational women and the controversial issues that we discuss.
If you'd like to be a part of our podcast, or if you have an issue that you have a burning desire for us to bring into the light, please contact us. With fierceness, Ashleigh
and Verity.
Get ready for the revolution.